welcome to our webinar. As you can see, we have an esteemed panel here. So I'm going to be a moderator for the day. I'm going to run through the flow as well as present some of the key questions that we're covering today. So to get us started, let me talk about the discussion points that we have planned today. So as all of us are very familiar, we've been living in disruptive times, and I continue to say this statement every year because it just tends to get more and more disruptive. So we thought it's a good time for us to look at how some of the industries that we all hold near and dear are shaping up. So how the enterprises really thinking about their sourcing priorities, how they're thinking about managing their industry tech and services differently. Also, how does this vary by how mature an area are you present in? Then we're also going to explore how technology impacts our day in day out lives, and finally look at the success factors that will take for both technologies to be successful industries, as well as sourcing models to evolve between the third parties and the enterprises. So that's our agenda for today. We'll welcome as many questions as you have. The chat functionality is open. Keep your questions coming, and we'll try and take those questions along the way. But we also have a small Q&A section planned towards the end of the webinar later in the day. So let's get us started. So let me start with the first set of questions. So when you think about enterprise priorities, so Everest Group conducts our own key issue studies. We talk to a lot of enterprises, but I'm going to pull in some of my panelists here in a minute to talk about how do we see their own enterprises reacting to it. When we think about industries like healthcare or banking or CPG, how are those industries really reacting to all the disruptive environments that we are going through? So let me invite Ankur to kind of talk about some of those things. Ankur?
Thank you. So great to be part of this discussion representing industries that account for almost 17% of US GDP. Now, when we think about enterprises and when we think about the disruption which is happening in today's world, I think there are two key priorities that enterprises right now have, right? So which is optimizing cost and protecting their profitability. Now, with this, I do also want to highlight that as enterprises think about the challenges and priorities that they have, it varies from industry to industry as well, right? And I'll give some examples, right? So think about a healthcare provider industry, right? If you look at the last 4 years, the labor costs have increased by almost 40%, right? Which is significant. We know US has shortage of almost 100,000 nurses. So for a healthcare provider industry, yes, cost is a challenge, but the cost from a point of view of talent. Now, when we move to, let's say, a healthcare payer industry, now, when we look at healthcare payers, protecting bottom line is a key challenge. Now, why I'm saying so? Because if you look at, one of the most important development that has happened in the last 6 months, it was a large payer like Cigna divesting its Medicare Advantage business. Now, when we look at Medicare Advantage, it's a business, enrollment is growing significantly, and yet Cigna divested that because it believed that the bottom line of the company was impacted by the Medicare Advantage line of business. The amount of investment was much more compared to the returns that it was getting. So for a healthcare insurance industry, yes, cost is a challenge, but from profitability point of view. Now, we can similarly talk about an industry like life sciences, right? Where we know that the era of blockbuster drugs is coming to an end, right? Some estimates says that between 23 and 28, almost $400 billion worth of, branded sales will come to an end, which is significant. So from an overall enterprise challenges or priority point of view, Manu, I believe that cost and profitability is the biggest concern. However, those varies by industries.
So, Ankur, that's a very, very interesting point. So let me pass it to Suman. So, Suman, you look at the banking, financial service, and insurance world. How are you seeing the industry shape up there? Because obviously things can vary across industries. So how do the priorities look like in your neck of the woods?
For the banking, financial services, and insurance industry, there has been the geopolitical risk and the rise in frauds have impacted the enterprises a lot. From the perspective of the conflicts which are happening, the sanctions volumes have risen, and the kind of activities which the fraudulent scamsters are working on, I think those are the ones which impact the BFS and insurance enterprises a lot more, and they're taking steps towards mitigating those. Those are the imminent ones which they have to work on right now, but the longer term goals are um, on modernization and reducing the operational inefficiencies which they have to bring down the costs. Like in healthcare life sciences, which Ankur mentioned, cost is a priority as well. And reduction of costs would help them reduce the cost which is passed on to the end customers, and thus helping them retain those customers, especially when fintechs, insurtechs are coming and challenging these large enterprises.
Interesting. So I guess that kind of also explains why we see this huge variation between what were the priorities till let's say 2 years ago, when a lot of the clients we were speaking to, they were looking at different drivers, right? So cost was, yes, it's always a high driver, but guess what? 2 years ago, it was not the number one driver. Today it is. Then similarly, slowdown in demand, adapting to see customer needs, new business models. A lot of these priorities have started coming up. Even the geopolitical risk, as you rightly called out, Suman, it's gone from being number 8 to till about 2 years ago to now being amongst the top 5 priorities. So yeah, so we're seeing a lot of disruption. So before we move on, so I would like to ask our participants, our attendees today, a quick polling question. So what are the specific industry sectors that you most commonly look at, whether it's the banking side of the world, whether it's insurance or healthcare? So what are the areas that you are most interested in? Tell us your opinion through your polls so that we can try and bake our inputs today to gear towards one or more of those industry sectors and accordingly bring out more examples that pertain to the environment that you are most interested in. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of responses coming in. Seems like banking and financial services is ahead by a hair split. Insurance, healthcare are close seconds, but I think the difference is not that great. So hopefully there's a lot of interest across a lot of different industries, which is good because that's how we planned the session today. We'll have a lot of different examples from different sectors coming through. Okay, I think we have a pretty decent amount of poll. Let me show the results here so that everybody can view those. So I said banking, financial services ahead by a hair split, but then healthcare and insurance are a close second and third. So fair enough. So we have our SMEs here. So hopefully we'll get to hear a lot more good examples around what's happening in those industries later today.
I think one of the results are pretty interesting, right? Because if you look at all of these industries, probably banking and financial services is one of those industries which is significantly impacted by what's happening all around us, the macroeconomics. So I think the results are in line with those. I do also want to highlight one more thing, right? So I think as enterprises think about these challenges, I think potentially there are three ways or I would say three elements to look at, right? So one is how regulations are impacting, right? Second is the disruptions which are happening, whether it's generative AI or the talent-related disruptions, and the expectations. So what expectations the customers and the consumers have, right? So doesn't matter which industry are we talking about. I think the challenges will relate to these three key elements.
So let me pose that question to our audience. And so tell us through chat, what are the questions that you are most interested in? Which of these aspects would you want to learn the most about, whether it's for banking or insurance or any of the other industries that are mentioned here? So tell us those questions so that we can start addressing those as we move along. Okay. In the meantime, I will continue to move forward with the content. Oops. I seem to be having a little bit of a difficulty in terms of moving the slides. Peter, could you help us out there? Can you move to the next slide? Thanks. So the next question that I actually wanted to ask, and Suman, I'm going to pick on you first. So you talked about how the enterprise are reacting to some of the geopolitical stuff. But let's be honest, right? Not every bank is same. We can't really expect the large global banks, Citigroups, Wells Fargo's, Bank of America, to respond in the same way to these changes as some of the smaller regional banks would. So how are you seeing the difference in adoption rates in terms of reactions that you're seeing from different types of banking community?
Yeah.
Oops.
Just I think, Manu, over the last decade, enterprises have heavily invested in generating end customer demand, right? And this has actually put a lot of strain on their operational environments, and the operational techs have been stretched a lot. What we have seen is that enterprises are unable to respond in the manner which their customers demand. For example, in the case of banking and insurance, you see a lot of digital transactions rising, and that leads to a lot of volume rise in terms of onboarding, payments, and there are the regulatory aspects as well kicking in. What uh, what we believe is that enterprises want to unlock operational excellence that enables greater agility, faster innovation, and sustained growth. But they have to focus on that high performance operations approach to be able to service their customers with highest levels of operations and highest expectation being met. On this slide, what we have done is we have placed an operational maturity model, which would help enterprises understand what the current state is. And it also provides guidelines to progress along the maturity curve. So you have these enterprises with high maturity on the right, who prioritize their operations, who are investing in reengineering their business processes, who are upskilling their talent, who are adopting a change management approach given a lot of tech disruption happening, and are changing their technology investments towards platforms, data, AI to drive integration, automation, and optimization across the entire business. On the left side, you see fundamental state enterprises. Fundamental state enterprises are rather proactive, are reactive rather than proactive. And the primary objective is operational risk mitigation. They are just starting in the world of outsourcing, and the focus is mostly around uh, the like a little bit of modernization, and their automation is siloed. They have basic talent strategies. There's a long way they have to go toward. There's a lot of changes they have to make to go towards the leader's position. So this is a model which is present here
Got
to
it.
explore the factors which influence this enterprise maturity and the way the factors change across.
And Ankur, how would you think about the maturity model when it comes to the healthcare life science side of the world? Have you seen any major differences?
Absolutely, Manu, right? So when we speak to enterprises across payer, provider, and life sciences industry, right, what we realize is that not every enterprise is at the same maturity level, right? Now, the question is that why is it important to understand the maturity level of an enterprise, right? Because when we talk about a transformation, we know the end state, but there has to be a journey that an enterprise has to go to reach that end stage. Now, I'll give a couple of examples of enterprises and how having placement or understanding of the maturity level is important for any enterprise to go transformation, right? So let's just think about a health system like Mayo Clinic, right? Now, Mayo Clinic is considered to be a leader in technology implementation, right? It has signed a 10-year partnership with Google to create enterprise healthcare chatbots, right? Which can look at the enterprise data and give results of medical records, lab records, and so on. Not only that, right? So with Google, which is a hyperscaler, it has a partnership, right? It has also invested in a startup company called Cerebrus to create AI-based personalized treatment plans for patients which are coming into the facility, right? So that's the investment that Mayo Clinic has made in a startup company. And similarly, it has investments across, service providers, ISVs, and so on. Now, if I am a healthcare enterprise, right, and if I want to go for transformation, I need to understand that I have made these investments, but there are certain gaps which still I need to fulfill to reach that end state, right? Now, what could be a framework to understand those gaps, right? So we have this framework on this slide where an enterprise can really evaluate the maturity level by looking at the talent, the platform, the data analytics investment, the automation investment, the governance structure that it has, right? Uh, so I think these are the elements that an enterprise has to think about as it's looking at the maturity model and maturity model and understanding where it lies.
Interesting. So, and Ankur, that brings us to the first question from the audience. So we have a question from Manoj Kapoor, and he's asking about how do you think about cybersecurity as an issue, especially in the healthcare community? So, and he goes on to mention again a lot of the stuff that we heard about what happened with the Change Healthcare stuff. So, are we starting to see a huge uplift in some of the cybersecurity issues and how the CXO community is thinking about it? So, what are your thoughts about it from a healthcare perspective? And then, Suman, I probably want to hear your thoughts as well, because this is the day in, day and loud life for banks and insurers as well.
Interesting question, Manu, because if you look at the last 6 months, right, one of the biggest development that has happened in the industry, which was unfortunate, was the Change Healthcare fiasco, right? Uh, After that event, I would say, especially from healthcare providers, right, almost 50 to 60% of the inquiries that we received were around, how to, first of all, what impact it could have on the hospital systems, the health systems, and second, what they can do to ensure that next time when something like that happens, they are protected against that, right? So the first part of the answer is that absolutely cybersecurity has become one of the most talked about uh, problem statements that healthcare providers have after the Change Healthcare fiasco. Second point I would want to highlight is that many, especially the large health systems, right? Because when we think about something happening, we also think that they would have taken 15 or 20 different steps to mitigate that. No, I think the mature healthcare enterprises, they are evaluating the options that they have, right? And the not only from the third party relationships that they have, right? But also from the investment in terms of data security, in terms of the AI, in terms of different solutions that they have, that they need to make, right? So I think enterprises right now, especially the mature ones, they are in a evaluation phase. Some of those steps will come out in the subsequent months, where we'll see probably some health systems shifting or changing their third party partners as well, and the others will invest in certain solutions to make sure that the data security aspect of the relationship of the contract is taken care of.
Suman, what's your point of view on the BFSI side of the world, especially when it pertains to cybersecurity? And I know you served as a CIO yourself, so I'm sure you'll have some very interesting point of view as you've been on the other side of this conversation.
Yeah, I think, Manu, that is, I mean, if you look at it, there are two broad views, right? One, that which is policy driven and which the regulators have brought about. And then there is a internal guidelines as well, because you have that reputation risk as well running in, and you can't lose customers in such a competitive environment to someone who is more secure, who is more aware of the typologies being used by scamsters and the use of technology in creating deepfake profiles and other aspects of breaches, right? So I think the regulator, while is reviewing, auditing, and making sure that the banks are implementing some of those controls and mechanisms, the banks themselves are taking in those reviews and audits themselves and trying to check where the gaps are. While the flaws have not been mitigated completely, the scrutiny internally and also from the regulators have increased, making sure that these flaws are looked at. For example, in India, you have the reporting mechanisms kicking in when there is a breach, like in an hour or so, you have to report, and basically within 24 hours, you need to start taking action, right? So there is that cert in reporting which kicks in India, which if there is any breach per se. So these kind of mechanisms from the industry players coming together to solve it, that would help the banks and insurance enterprises to mitigate these cybersecurity issues a lot more better. But then it's an evolving field, and the investment needs to be done consistently.
Interesting. So essentially, what we're saying is we are at a stage where, because of some of the recent breaches, the sensitivity around this issue is very high, but our technology, our operations have not fully caught on yet. So then I would imagine that in the next few years, we're going to see a huge adoption of some of those solutions to help plug some of the data leakage issues, the cybersecurity issues. So which brings us to the next part of the conversation, which is about technology adoption. So let's go through that. So, as all of us know, right, the technology has been around for a while. So, what's been the adoption so far, right? What are you, both of you, seeing in your areas in terms of how adopt technology is creating an impact on the industry side, or as well as the rest of the services space that we see? So, Ankur, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure, Manu. And Manu, I think this is a million-dollar question, right? Because when we speak to enterprises, I think one of the questions that they have is that which are the right technology elements that they should deploy, and what could the journey look like, right? So, and I answer it in three parts, right? So, whenever we talk about technology elements from an enterprise ecosystem point of view, the first part is understanding the elements which are present, right? From the very basic to the most advanced, right? So, think about, and I'll take example of claims, healthcare claims processing, right? So, think about an RPA solution, right? We know that simpler claims can be processed by robotic process automation, right? So that's a simpler form of technology. Then something like process mining, right? We know that claims operations, right, which include processing, subrogation, disbursement, payment integrity, and so on, right? So process mining can help identify those gaps, right? It's a more advanced form of technology element than RPA, but still, something which is not as advanced as, let's say, intelligent automation or AI, right? Then we move towards IDP, intelligent automation, and what we know is that at least from a claims point of view, a large number of claims are still paper oriented, right? So the leverage or the adoption of IDP is still on the higher side when it comes to uh, technology. And similarly, AI, right? So AI is something which a lot of POCs right now is happening in the industry. So the first part is, Manu, which is understanding the technology elements that exist. The second part I would say is, as enterprise think about technology elements or right solutions, context is very important, right? Context and complexity of the process, right? Now, this is a very interesting chart, right? Because if you look at the adoption of RPA and compare that to IDP, IDP has significantly higher adoption, right? Why is it so? Because if you look at healthcare, right, and I'll again take example of claims, different payers have different rules, right? Not only that, when it comes to Medicare versus Medicaid versus commercial plans, the rules and the processes are different, right? Which means the exceptions that exist in industry pertaining to the processes is much more compared to, let's say, contact center or F&A. Now, because of that, uh, the adoption of more complex forms of technology like IDP and intelligent automation is higher than RPA from an industry context point of view, right? Now, it has a silver lining, right? Because if you look at the last 6 months, generative AI and AI has been the most disruptive element that has come to the industry, right? And with the level of complexity that AI can handle, what we believe is that it can significantly disrupt and impact healthcare operations, including claims, clinical, and even contact center as well.
Got it. So essentially what you're saying is it's the awareness of the context, whether it's the process context or whether it's the client context, that kind of helps technologies like IDP or intelligent automation to see better awareness. So when you think about the, let's say, the AI part of it, which arguably should be a lot more context aware, how do you see the application of that across different sectors that you look at?
Uh, the application definitely is there, Manu, because it's an interesting field, and banking, financial services, enterprises, insurance enterprises are looking at the predictive side of it, the generative side of it, and trying to solve very complex problems affecting the industry, right? But what we are seeing is that even before that, they are plagued by these problems of this legacy and complex systems and disparate nature. They're not talking to each other. Then there is the lack of talent, this lack of the data fabric, which would help them figure out the view from all aspects. I think governance related challenges, then there is change management related challenges, because these are huge in scale. The organizations are very complexly designed, and they are distributed across geos with their own geo regulations and such. So the AI part of it, while it is being used more internally for internal functions, the customer facing ones are a little bit delayed because they want to solve those challenges first before exposing AI to the end customers. Um, it could be risk mitigation in the sense that don't want that hallucination to affect customers. They don't want, they don't want the ethical or other issues like bias, etc., affecting the end customers. I think it's more wait and watch for BFSI than per se other industries.
Fair enough. So, see, and then we've always been worried about the implications of AI, whether it's, as you rightly mentioned, the ethical part of it, the hallucination part of it. So I think this is a good opportunity to maybe ask another question to our audience here. So, if we think about the adoption of AI, amongst all of the areas that you have been talking about, where we see some of high tension, I want to understand from the audience, where do you see is the impact of AI likely going to be highest? So let's take a quick poll, see what kind of results we show up. What's the audience sentiment around how AI is going to affect different aspects of the services market? Okay, so the results are starting to come in. There's a lot more people still voting, but sounds like unsurprisingly, contact center and customer experience is coming out to be on the top side of it. We've published a lot of research around this area, and we know that okay, that is absolutely an area where we also expect a lot of the use cases to come up. But seems like the industry areas are actually the second in line. So there's a bit of a gap, but yeah, it's not unsurprising to see the industry is the next place where a lot of the impact seems to be expected by this audience. Let me end the poll and show everybody the results quickly. There you are. So not surprising at all. Contact center, as all of us we have been discussing, and some of the impact we've been seeing in the industry, we're already starting to see very high proliferation of AI. A lot of the use cases that we have been discussing with our enterprise clients tend to come from the contact center world. So completely unsurprised by these results, but good validation. Hopefully, that's good insight for this audience as well. Which brings me to our offer for the day. So, and I still have a sticky button, so it doesn't seem to be moving my slides. There you go. So the offer for the day we have for this audience is if you want to hear more from our experts, or from Suman, from Ankur, from me, or from others, and you want to talk about any of these research pieces, we are offering a complimentary call for anybody who wants to access it. Whether you want to talk about the banking side of the house or the healthcare side of the house, here's your chance today. So we'll have a link that is going to be posted in chat by one of our admins. Click on that button. It will allow you to submit a request where one of our SMEs will get together with you and will offer you a complimentary walkthrough of one of these reports and answer any of the questions that you have. So it's a one-time offer for the audience who is attending the call today. So hopefully you can make the best of it. Okay, and a quick reminder before we continue the conversation that keep your questions coming. I do see a few questions which are pending in the chat, and I'll try and post them towards the end of the webinar today when we have the Q&A section. But now we're heading into the meaty part of the discussion. We're going to talk about what does it take for the industry-specific technology solutions to kind of be successful, and then what could these service providers and enterprises do differently to actually evolve their relationships. So let's talk about the industry-specific technology solutions first. So Suman, do you want to maybe give us a brief overview of what are some of the key success factors that you have most commonly seen the enterprises talk about when they think about either selecting a technology partner or a particular solution that they would like to go ahead with?
Sure. I think I'll go with the context awareness which Ankur as well brought about, right? I think that is something which the enterprises really look for. The challenge around BFSI has been, I mean, if you look at BFSI combined, the challenge has been regulatory oversight and because the industry itself deals with safeguarding of wealth, safeguarding of risk, and such critical elements, the regulators have increased their scrutiny. And because of the breaches which have happened in the recent times, the AML sanctions, KYC parts of it have been really, the oversight has increased in these areas and really are being chased by the regulators. Apart from that, the end customer experience is really driving the enterprise. Uh, the enterprise challenge is around how to address those customer experience problems and how to ensure that they are prepared to meet the changing demands. For example, the digital transactions increasing, a lot of the branch banking reducing, and there is ubiquitousness in terms of multiple payment methods, easier payment transfers, etc. So how would they keep up with this? And then the end customer is now expecting the banks to be more agile, more scalable, more flexible, especially after COVID. This has seen to increase. The data security and compliance aspects of it are really critical because if there is a loss of data, especially customer identifiable, there is a risk of losing the license. And for banks and insurance enterprises, there is also this the frauds happen across these industries together, and they want to share data, but then there is these risks involved in sharing the data. So they're figuring out how they can exchange the data while being compliant. The interoperability and the ecosystem coming in together to solve some of these problems, especially the legacy aspect of it, and traditionally looking at it more from the front office, back office view, and then not talking to each other. These are some of the aspects which are impacting the BFSI industry, and they want the solutions now to meet some of these criteria so that one, the overall ownership cost reduces, and there is a sense of flexibility which comes in, the sense of scalability which comes in, especially when the demand is increasing drastically. Otherwise, they'll start crumbling and basically they'll either be absorbed by some other enterprises or they'll have to lose business to the fintechs and insurtechs who are much more aware of, especially the customer experience and the interoperability and ecosystem aspects.
So then sounds like if I trace some of these things back, I think a root of all of these things kind of lies in the data democratization that we've been talking about. In sectors like BFSI, where the democratization is happening fast, it probably pushes the envelope further and further because now you have interoperability issues. You need to work on the ecosystem play because the data is more widely available. You can design better customer experience around it, but then you also have to protect the data. So a lot of these issues seem to kind of fall in place. So in many ways, data democratization is helping us evolve, but at the same time, it seems to be also posting a lot of problem statements that honestly the industry hasn't solved for. So let me, on that note, pose that question maybe, Ankur, to you. So when you think about the operating models in the industry, there's a lot of questions around, okay, hey, what kind of operating model should I do? Whether and there are the different benefits and pros of it. How do you think about it? How do you guide enterprises in terms of thinking about various sourcing options, operating models, and what would be the right success factors for them to consider when they're thinking of model A versus model B?
Perfect. And when we link this to the earlier point that I made around understanding the maturity placement of an enterprise, right? Because once you understand that on a maturity curve, where do you lie, you can evaluate different operating models that exist, right? Now, let's talk about some of those operating models, right? The first one is most basic, right? Business process outsourcing, where you are outsourcing for you know primarily for cost, right? So you are sending work to offshore locations, right? Or you are sending work to organizations who are expert in certain areas. This is suited for organizations who have never taken support from third-party organizations and they're starting on their transformation journey, right? So that's step one. Second, operating model could be what we call digital-led operations, where you are not only focusing on the talent and the people aspect of sourcing, but you're also focusing on identifying technology elements, right? We call them point solutions, which can improve or which can help you in improving the efficiency of your operations, right? Now, there are some pros around these solutions. They are quick to implement, they are flexible because they can be used as a bolt-on solutions or the on the top of your existing systems that exist, right? Now, some of the issues around digital-led operations or digital or point solutions is that data readiness is an issue, right? Because for enterprises, especially in a sensitive industry like healthcare and life sciences, they don't want to share their data. And in the absence of data, for anyone to make a digital-led operations model successful is difficult. Now, moving on to first, I'll talk about platform operations. Right now, platform operation means that the enterprises is leveraging both product and services support from an organization which might not be owning that product, but which is providing that support as a bundled package. Now, the pros around the platform operations is that you get best of breed products, right? You can select what products you want. But the limitation is that the integration aspect of platform operations is a challenge, right? Because would that platform integrate with your existing systems if later on you want to expand the operations or if later on you want to move towards more interoperability? So that's a challenge that exists within platform operations operating model. The fourth one, which is more advanced form of platform operations, is BPaaS, right? Where you are leveraging a cloud platform. You are also leveraging services and system integration, again, from a service provider or from an entity which is responsible for providing all three of them as a bundle package to you, right? Now, a BPaaS kind of operating models, they are very tightly integrated with the existing legacy systems that enterprises have. So that's the biggest advantage of a BPaaS kind of an operating model, right? Uh, from a limitation point of view, Manu, I think the limitation associated with BPaaS is change management and to some extent cost, right? These models are more expensive than the three models that we have talked about earlier. And the change management around that is pretty significant, right? So you have to bring these silos that exist in the enterprise together. And in many situations, that becomes a hassle, right? One model which we have not mentioned, but I think which is important, is the full transformation rip and replace model, right? Where enterprises replace the existing systems that they have, right? It also involves overhaul of the talent, which is the people part of the equation, as well as the process part of the equation, right? So the transformation driven by rip and replacement of existing systems is also an operating model that enterprise opt for. Now, these are the models that exist, but still, I do want to highlight that some models might seem more lucrative, but which model to adopt completely depends on the maturity curve that an enterprise is, where the enterprise is placed on that maturity curve, and what is the end state that it wants to achieve, right? Somebody like Mayo Clinic for them, investing in digital-led operations will not give substantial returns, whereas BPaaS or platform plus operations could be the next step for them.
So then let me pose that question to this group as well. So again, another question for our audience. When you think about these operating models, which are the models that either you get asked about the most questions or the ones that you are personally most invested in? So essentially, we're trying to see amongst these four models of choice, which are the ones which you most commonly hear about, where do we see the maximum interest coming from the industry? So yeah, the poll question is live. The results seem to be coming in. Seems to be pretty even Steven so far. Seems like the interest is pretty widespread across all of those models. Uh, I do see the platform operations and digital operations maybe pulling ahead a little bit now, but let's see what the final results end up being. I'll post those results in just about a few seconds. And another quick reminder for the audience. So we were nearing the end of our webinar. We have one last section to go. So post that, we will be able to take questions. So feel free to post your questions. We'll try and aggregate and cover as many questions as we can towards the last 5 to 10 minutes of this webinar. Whatever we can't answer today, we'll be happy to kind of follow through on those offline. Okay, let's see. Let's look at the results. So yeah, so platform operations and digital operations seems to be the clear winner. They got most of the votes. Actually, that's exact same number of votes. Seems like BPaaS and the most classic labor arbitrage model. So the upper end of the models and the lower end of the models, those seem to be the less prevalent in the industry. Those seem to be the less interesting ones. People are more interested in about how do I make my operation successful without doing too much of transformation or none of it. Okay, so then let's look at how are some of these service providers comparing on some of these things when we look at the actual adoption rate in the industry. Once again, the poll question seems to have stuck myself. There you go. So let's talk about the operating models that are prevalent in the industry and how are the service providers performing on it. So when we looked at both the healthcare and the financial side of the world, we realized that there's a huge gap in terms of what the priorities for the enterprises are, and how some of these suppliers are performing against it. So there is a gap in the expectation versus the delivery. What we want to do today is talk a little bit about what can both the enterprises and service providers collectively do to close these gaps. Because every time we talk to those to both sides of the house, it's not a question of who did what. It's a question of are both of us coming together as a joint party to enable this conversation. So I'm going to again bring in my panelists to kind of talk about what are some of the success factors that can help us close this divide between performance versus expectation. So Ankur, let's start with you.
The spider chart that you showed, those were interesting because if you look at cost reduction, right? Because when we think about sourcing, when we think about outsourcing, for the longest time, cost was the primary driver. But it seems like the industry has reached a stage where it's no longer about cost, right? It's about technology, analytics, interoperability, customer experience, and so on. So I think as enterprises and service providers think about the new sourcing model, right, there are a few elements that they should consider, right? First of all, as we go into and then we call it BPS 4.0. There are different names that exist in the industry, right? But when essentially there could be five elements, around which we can structure the new outsourcing model, that is building in the industry, right? One, I would say a design thinking led approach, right? Which is understanding and not looking at different functions, whether it is front office, mid office, and back office as a standalone stack, right? I think enterprises and service providers have to work together to integrate those different functions and silos that exist, which can only happen through a design thinking led approach. Then I would say, the focus on domain was always there for any industry specific solution. The domain part is very important, right? Because when we talk about, let's say, something like healthcare, understanding of value-based care, understanding of rules like, let's say, patient access and interoperability rule, that's very important, right? So domain is very important as we think about outsourcing 4.0 or BPO 4.0. Then I would say the importance of data in digital. We have talked about AI. We have talked about how AI can impact the operations, but the basic of AI is data and data democratization, which we have also talked about, right? So how to really leverage the enterprise data that exists is very important, right? We know that almost 85% of the enterprise data, at least in healthcare industry, as of now, it's not leveraged anywhere, right? It's unstructured. Enterprises do not have a means to structure it and use it. Now, the next two levels which I want to talk about, those are most important, right? Which is DevOps oriented approach, right? What do we mean by DevOps, right? I think in the industry in the past, there was a industry used to think about IT, BPO, software product separately. There was no understanding of focusing more on the outcomes and using these elements just as a building block to reach those outcomes. But what we are seeing in the industry is that the success of PPS 4.0 is completely dependent on some of these integrated IT BPO approach that enterprises are now more interested in knowing about. And we believe that service providers should invest in that and offer that to enterprises. And finally, differentiated and distributed workforce. Now we have reached post-COVID, we have reached a stage where brick and mortar is not the only delivery model that exists. There are delivery models where enterprises wants to take benefits of available talent. For example, in healthcare, we talk about clinical talent, right? So now what we are seeing is that not only Philippines, but now enterprises are also leveraging locations like, let's say Africa, to some extent LATAM for their, workforce needs. So the workforce distribution is also an important element as we think about the new ways of outsourcing or new ways of sourcing.
Got it. So essentially, we were talking about more of an outcome-driven kind of an approach, which kind of makes sense given the AI-enabled world we are starting to live in, where the focus is not just about deploying tech for the sake of it, but thinking about the end outcome, the end result first, and then working your way backwards as to figure out what are the right teams, what are the right tools that you need to kind of enable that. So Suman, so last question for the day for you. So are there specific models or examples where you've seen some of these BPS 4.0 concepts really come to life?
Yeah, Manu, I think when we were talking about the high maturity firms, I think from some of these levers are being pulled by this high mature leaders much more easily. Like for example, Bank of America, Citi, JPMC. We have seen them use RPA. We have seen them use all those intelligent automation IDP tools much more easily. I think one of the reasons is that they have realized this value of front, middle, back office enterprise functions talking to each other, and they're now forcing service providers to think in an integrated way, not to operate in silos. I mean, some of it is also leading to vendor consolidation, right? Because if the service providers are not talking in the same language as what the enterprises are demanding, basically they're now at risk of being replaced. So the service providers are now looking at those aspects of joining these front, middle, and back office uh, through data first, and then building, say, orchestration layers on top of it for the employee experience as well to be enhanced, and also the customer experience. What we have also seen is that there is a lot more domain centricity coming in with operations such as that of underwriting, that of claims, and other judgment-oriented processes being outsourced. The challenge with the enterprises has been to retain some of this talent and to cross-skill, upskill them, which the service providers are now able to do. And there is, like, for example, during this mortgage downturn, we were seeing that a lot of the employees were trained on the financial crime compliance processes and other areas which got ramped up. So to ensure that peak capacity can be maintained, some of the domain trainings have now been started right from the college level itself, and that gives the service providers a much more bench strength and domain trained resources to be able to be brought in when there's peak demand. From the perspective of data and digital driven, we have seen a lot of operational analytics and predictive analytics coming into play, and the enterprises trying to preempt some of the events before them happening, especially when it comes to claims processes. Um, for that, I think the demand from service providers has been to come up with those advanced analytics and AI-based solutions to be able to reduce the costs incurred due to fraud, due to claims, and other such aspects. And we see generative AI now coming in to sometimes train the resources, sometimes to be able to assist the resources, especially in underwriting claims and the customer facing aspects of it. And then there is this aspect of summarizing a lot of these documents which are being processed. All of these coming together now to reduce some of the challenges which the enterprises face. So I think a lot of examples, especially from the high mature firms, the more fundamental and progressive firms are focusing on running their operations more and on the perform aspects of it than on the transformation aspects of it. However, they're reaching there because now they've learned these lessons and implementing, and they're getting help from the service providers to become mature at a more faster rate.
Thanks, Suman. That's really helpful. So with that, we have reached the end of our content part of the portion, and we now head into the Q&A. Unfortunately, we only have about 5 or 6 minutes left, so we'll probably narrow it down to one, maybe two questions. So let me see, what questions do we have? Okay, so the first question, and I think Ankur, Suman, happy to hear either of your thoughts on this one. So this is about the transformation agenda. So the question goes, when enterprises think about the transformation strategy, how do they create a roadmap? How, and what are some of the key bottlenecks and pitfalls to avoid along the way? Ankur, Suman, would either of you care to chime on that question?
Okay. Absolutely, Manu. So I think, am I audible?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Ankur.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Manu, I think when enterprises think about creating a transformation roadmap, essentially they can divide it into three elements, right? One is the talent aspect of it. Second is the technology, and third is the governance, right? I'll start with governance because we have talked about talent and technology, but not governance, right? So for any technology, any transformation, it's important to set up the right governance that exists internally as well as external relationships. Now, governance can be set up through let's say creating a center of excellence, right, focused on transformation. And we have seen, we have seen many times that whenever enterprises go for transformation, they set up a center of excellence, which decides the current state of the enterprise as well as the investment internally and externally that they have to make, right? So I would say the first and the most important step is the governance aspect of it. Second, from a technology point of view, Manu, it's important to understand, first of all, the existing ecosystem that enterprises have and where do they want to reach, right? For example, if the focus is to reduce, let's say, cost by 20-30%, then potentially a digital-led operations or platform operations could be the right operating model, and the technology investment should be around that, right? If the enterprise believe, no, we want to completely transform our claims operations or our clinical operations, then they have to invest in technologies like BPaaS, right, SaaS, or even complete rip and replacement of their existing system. So the second important point is for creating this roadmap is to understand the technology investment which is required by looking at the current state. The third, I would say, is the people's part, which is, what we realize is that for any enterprises, there are many known core processes which where enterprises do not excel, right? Let's think about something like, you know, something like, let's say, administrative work around claims processing, right? Or administrative work around clinical. Now, these are the areas where identifying, first of all, the right talent strategy, which is the talent that I should keep in-house, and which is the talent which I should outsource. So identifying the right sourcing or talent strategy. Once you identify the right talent strategy, right, identifying the right partners and right locations. For example, I was working with a healthcare payer which wanted to reframe or restructure its clinical sourcing talent strategy, right? And they had identified, 50 roles which they wanted to offshore. So from that point, it was only about identifying the locations and the right partners, right? So I think these are the three key elements, Manu, which I believe are important for enterprises to think about as they're creating a roadmap for transformation.
Fair enough. And I think in the interest of time, given we are close to the end of our session, just to sum it up, I think when we think about transformation, the biggest bottleneck that I have personally seen in some of these transactions is that we underestimate the change management that's required. We're very quick to jump onto the solutions, the technology, and the people part of it, but we honestly don't really realize the amount degree of change an organization needs to go and the number of stakeholders involved in that change. So the siloed nature of these conversations is where we have seen personally a lot of the transformation projects kind of go to die. But having said that, I know we are at the end of time. I would like to thank our audience for joining us today. Hopefully, this was a very good session for you. I'm going to call out one last time our offer for the day. If you have interest in hearing about either of these reports and you want to get a complimentary copy of it, or you want to talk to one of our SMEs like Ankur and Suman and their teams around these reports or any other information you'd need, happy to kind of take those conversations offline. Thanks again for having us. This was great interacting with this audience, and we hope to stay in touch through other forms of communication. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Ankur and Suman, for the session.
Thank you.